Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Santi Lata, and I will be the moderator for this evening. Before we proceed with this event, I would like to invite you to view a message by the president of the Malaysian Bar. He has specifically recorded this message for this event. Dale?
A very good evening to Sharin Begum binti Abdul Subhan, Chairman of Johor Bar Committee, Mira Samanta, Vice President of Association of Women Lawyers, Shanti Lata, Secretary of the Association of Women Lawyers, Daniela Zulkifli, Exco of the Association of Women Lawyers, Liu Xin Yu, my fellow colleague at the Bar Council, honorable guests, members of the Bar, ladies and gentlemen. I bid you all a very warm welcome to the webinar on sexual harassment in the legal workspace, organized by the Johor Bar Committee and Association of Women Lawyers. I would like to thank the team from Johor Bar Committee and Association of Women Lawyers for making this webinar a reality. Sexual harassment in the workplace is generally viewed as a very sensitive topic by many. There needs to be a more open discourse to address the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace, especially among the members in the legal fraternity. While we are fortunate to have some members of the bar and members of the civil society who are always outspoken against any form of violence and discrimination against women, that isn't enough. Despite the Malaysian bar adopted the code of practice on the prevention and eradication of sexual harassment in the workplace back in 2007 in our 1590 AGM, but the complaint of sexual harassment that coming to the Bar Council have been very few. But it doesn't mean it's not happening. That could be various reasons why the victims are not coming forward. I would say there may be a legal impediments on the power of the Bar Council to inquire further on the kind of complaints like sexual harassment, but the Bar Council is studying the possibility to legitimize such an inquiry within the framework of the Legal Profession Act. In the interim, as President, let me reiterate that the Bar Council will not tolerate sexual harassment, and we do not want anyone to suffer in silence. Members are urged to come forward and relay the complaint to us. We have designated officers who could guide you through. Victims have various recourse to go through. If you're a member of the bar, you can resort to lodge complaint to the Advocate Solicitor's Disciplinary Board. Please do not hesitate to even lodge a police report. Based on the federal court case of Muhammad Rizwan, you can even file a civil suit for remedy against the perpetrator. Ladies and gentlemen, in our new legal profession bill, which we hope to be tabled next year, after finalization with the Attorney General Chamber, sexual harassment is expressly categorized as a form of professional misconduct. We also take cognizance of the news report that sexual harassment bill will be tabled in the Parliament at the end of this year. The Bar Council will be in full support of this bill. The need for a specific sexual harassment legislation is long overdue. As it stands, there is no specific legislation that provides for civil cause of actions per se for sexual harassment. The government's code of practice and the federal court decision in Muhammad Rizwan need legislative backing in sexual harassment cases. Therefore, the Bar Council calls upon the government to speed up the enactment of Sexual Harassment Act. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bar Council is committed to taking steps to put in place measures to deal with sexual harassment. I call upon state bars to encourage law firms to sign up voluntarily for the pledge, to have mechanism on prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. I was told that the KL Bar have taken the lead. I strongly urge other state bars to follow through. At least for now, ladies and gentlemen, the Bar Council has a specific Women's Rights Committee to look into matters of concern and the rights of women, headed by two very able ladies, Ms. Shahin Begum and Ms. Hanitan. I call upon members to render all help and support to this committee. Ladies and gentlemen, The Malaysian Bar stands with all affected parties and will continue to pursue a safe and healthy working environment, free from any sexual harassment and discriminations. I wish you all a meaningful and productive webinar. Thank you and stay safe.
We'd like to thank the President of the Malaysian Bar for an excellent opening to this session. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the event titled Sexual Harassment in the Legal Workspace. This event is organized in collaboration with the Johor Bar Committee and the Association of Women Lawyers, or AWL as we call ourselves. We're very privileged to have the following individuals join us for this discussion. Would the panelists like to switch their videos on, please? Let me introduce you to New Sin Yu. Sin Yu practices at Mrs. Amir Bond and was admitted to the High Court of Malaya in 2011. He is the Deputy Chairperson of the Bar Council Constitutional Law Committee and the Legal Profession Committee, and an elected member of the Bar Council. He has acted in numerous cases of public interest involving violations of free speech and expression under various laws, including the Communications and Multimedia Act, the Penal Code, and the Sedition Act. He has acted in many strategic litigation against public participants, SLAPP, matters using defamation. Our second panelist is Mira Samantha. Mira completed her master's in IP and shipping law in 1986 and joined the women's movement in 1995 during a short career break. In the late 1990s, she was part of the initial sexual harassment team that was assisting in drafting the sexual harassment bill. That's in the late 1990s, folks. And again, in 2004, when it was redrafted. In 2014, Mira was responsible for initiating a baseline survey on the working conditions of male and female lawyers in Kuala Lumpur and Selangor, in particular looking into issues of discrimination and sexual harassment in the legal profession. Mira is currently the Vice President of AWL and conducts regular training on feminist legal strategies for pupils in chambers, law students, and others. Our third panelist, Daniela Zulkifli, is an EXCO member of AWL and has been with AWL for nearly 10 years. Outside the workspace, she focuses her passion on issues relating to sexual harassment, child abuse, and sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR. Danny was part of the team that drafted the Sexual Offences Against Children Act and since 2017, she has been part of the Joint Action Group for Gender Equality, or JAG's, drafting team for the proposed sexual harassment bill. She was the co-chairperson of the Malaysian Bar's National Young Lawyers Committee between 2015 and 2016, and was a steering committee member of the Gender Equality Initiative, which is a project advocating for gender equality amongst law students. Joining us today also is the chair of the Johor Bar, Shireen Begum. She has recently passed the 30-year mark of continuous practice in the legal profession, and she runs her own firm, which focuses primarily on civil litigation. She is a certified trainer on the Bar Council's advocacy training course. She is the current and first woman chair of the Johor Bar, having served the Johor Bar since October 2010. So that's 10 years, Shireen. She is also currently the co-deputy chair of the Bar Council Advocacy Training Committee and the Bar Council Civil and Law Reform Committee, and the co-chair of the newly formed Bar Council Women's Rights Committee. And we have a fifth panelist. Our fifth panelist is a person we will call Survivor A. Survivor A, who will remain anonymous throughout this event, has joined us as a guest, and she will share her personal stories with us later. Let me start this by thanking Johor Bar for working with us and collaborating to make this event a reality, and Shireen especially for all the effort that you put into this. And we also thank you, the audience, who have answered a series of questions that form part of the registration process. The purpose of asking these questions was so that we can understand who you are and what you'd like to learn from this event. Now, at this point, I'd like to highlight that you'll be able to ask questions in the chat, and you'll be able to do that, and the questions will be transmitted to us, and we will answer the questions accordingly. Before I start, I would also like to emphasize that gender of the victim is not relevant to everything we're going to talk about. People of all genders have faced and continue to face sexual harassment. So this is not just a woman's issue. This is a people issue, and we collectively are the people. Let's start this discussion by sharing information that we have gathered from the questionnaire that you've answered. So I'm going to share screen now with you so that you can see the responses that we have received. So I'm starting this with an article that was published on the 10th of July 2020 by the Star Online. And in this article, they talked about sexual harassment and they considered a variety of factors. So in the top, you can see that women who reported sexual harassment, 54% of them told a friend, 51% of them told a family member, and 15%, only 15% reported this to the police. The women who didn't report it, 54% said that they felt embarrassed, 38% said that nothing could be done, so that's why they didn't report, 26% felt fearful about repercussions, and 18% felt social and cultural pressures. That's why the reporting on sexual harassment is low. Now, let's talk about you for a minute. So at the time I extracted this data, we had received 35 responses, although I believe we have more than 50 participants in attendance today. And of that, 74% of you are employed and 14% of you are currently unemployed. Gender-wise, 82% of our audience are women and 17% are men. And on the question, have you ever suffered sexual harassment at work or directly know someone who has suffered sexual harassment at work? 51%, 51.4% said yes. And on the question of whether it would be, what would be appropriate steps for the victim to take when faced with incident or incidents of sexual harassment, 40% suggested that they would expect people to make a police report. 31% think that lodging a complaint with the Human Resource Department or equivalent in that organization would be relevant. And 11.4% on both sides take the view that they should raise the matter with a superior within the organization or raise the matter with a family member or trusted friend. When we asked you whether you have a social media account, 97% said yes. And whether it's appropriate for a victim to raise the issue of sexual harassment on their own social media account, a whopping 57 of you said no, but 42.9% said yes. So the 57% who said no, their rationale includes, first, that they believe that it's necessary to follow the procedures or processes that are already in place. Second, the concern that there would be legal liability arising. A lot of people spoke about defamation as a specific example. The third concern was the risk of cyberbullying. And fourth, a smaller percentage said that this is actually a private matter. And because it's a private matter, it should not be raised even on the victim's own social media. Additional considerations include that using social media should be a last resort, and that you should rely on the proper route, meaning that you should go to the police or to your specific organization. Now, for the 46.9% who said yes, they said that they said that first, it's because they feel that creating awareness is very important. Second, they want to encourage others to speak out. So the belief is if one person speaks out on social media, everybody else will begin to speak out. Third, that it's an easier platform. And fourth, to promote the fact that you are not alone. And specific reference was made to #MeToo. Again, the concerns were raised about the risk of public backlash or cyberbullying, and also about being sued for defamation. Now, at this point, I'd like to pause in the sharing of the slides, and I'd like to invite Mira to speak about why 57.1% of the respondents would view the use of social media in a negative way when talking about a sexual harassment incident. What are your views about this, taking into account your experience in dealing with people who have suffered sexual harassment and perhaps have even talked about it on their social media? Mira?
Oh, I have to unmute.
You're already unmuted.
Oh, have I? Oh, sorry. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Santi, and thank you very much to the Johor Bar for inviting me and AWL. We're really excited for this opportunity to talk to our Johorians. Okay, Sandy, thank you for pointing out to us that sexual harassment affects all persons. I think that's a very timely reminder because it is not just male, female, trans persons, gay, lesbians, persons with disability, marginalized communities are affected too. And especially if you are a female, say, for example, female disabled person, I mean, there are what you would call intersectional discrimination, not just because of your gender, but also because of your disability. People do get discriminated and harassed. So I just wanted to point that out, that it cuts across all race and religion and class. As we know, sexual harassment, it is rooted in a power imbalance and steeped in a very patriarchal culture that permeates through the private sector, public sector, and so individuals who are affected by sexual harassment go through a varied form of emotions. As a psychological impact on them, it varies. Some are paralyzed, some fearful, some are even recluse. They hide in their shell. So and some are very fearful. So it really affects different forms of emotions. So despite the grave impact where some of them are paralyzed, why do survivors, or I would call them survivors, first they're victims, then they become survivors, choose social media rather than go through the legal process internally within the organization or file a police report? What pushes them or drives them to talk to the outside world, uh, even with people they don't know? There's several reasons. One is perhaps there's no policy within the organization. I'm also talking about within the university because I saw from the responses, there were some students that had also responded. Perhaps there's no policy there, or even if there was, there's a lack of reporting mechanism, or sometimes they don't trust the process. And maybe if they report, they feel fear of repercussions. Or sometimes even in that, whether it's a law firm or in the university, there's a very toxic culture within that organization or within the campus, and there's no zero tolerance policy. So I think it's important to remember at this point in time, those who are watching, those who are leaders, those who are partners in a law firm, it really is important that leadership sets the tone. It really is. And as we have seen, our president has set the tone. And that has to come, and I hope other bars like Johor is fantastic, is taking it on. Really, it is important. So why do they resort? I want to share with you what some of the survivors have shared with me. They said they just want to be heard, someone to listen to us. They find comfort even from strangers who may have experienced similar incidents. It's the solace and support. I mean, there is like a support network outside there, and they become empowered through that. That's one of the reasons. And of course, the success of the Me Too movement has also given them that courage to speak out on social media. I want to share two cases which going on social media has had a positive impact. I will share later about the negative impact because I know about 57 or 57% said no going on social media. The National University of Singapore case of Monica Bay is an important case that I think it's important to understand, where Monica Bay, she took to social media to speak out on online harassment she faced by a fellow student who filmed her showering in her university hostel. Monica received, of course, backlash for going online to talk about it. And mind you, so did the perpetrator. But she was very clever. Monica was smart. She pushed the discussion not to concentrate on the incident, but how can we, as university students, improve the process? I thought that was a very good, smart move. I mean, yes, NUS suspended him for a semester and banned him from entering campus and made him send Monica a letter of apology. But what the university students did was interesting. They had a town hall meeting. And at the town hall meeting, they spoke about the university's lack of victim support, lack of communication from the university. As you all may know, I'm not sure, recently at MMU, there was a survivor of sexual harassment within the university, and she reported it. And she was not informed of the process. So similarly, the lack of communication they spoke about. So what NUS did was they set up a unit to support victims. That really had a positive impact going online. And this had spurred other Singapore universities to rethink of their sexual harassment policy. And what, in fact, Nanyang Technological University did was they introduced a new anti-harassment online module. And that module was drafted by students and the lecturers together. And what the module had was what constitutes harassment, what are the support resources, and to raise awareness on how to deal with such situations. So basically, the bottom line is what was needed was a what you call a safe and conducive environment is what they wanted. So that was one case. And then I bring you to the legal fraternity. Another positive, in fact, I think, is within our legal fraternity. Sometime early this year, a survivor spoke to us about her ordeal and that she had gone online. And that, of course, there was backlash. She reached out to AWL, Association of Women Lawyers. What we did was we issued a press statement, not just one line stating about a general incident, but not talking about the incident. But what we spoke about was that the dire need for a sexual harassment policy, that zero tolerance policy, that we need a redress mechanism to be sorted out within the bar. And we also tried to push the president to make a statement, the former president of the bar. Yes, the former president did issue a statement, and he said exactly what our present president said. Yes, we need a sexual harassment policy. We need to look at the redress mechanism. Yes, we need to have a sexual harassment legislation. So this, and exactly what Salim said, was a sexual harassment may soon be treated as misconduct. So there are two positive impact, but of course, both the survivors and the cases, I must say, did go through trauma to get where they were. Let's not forget that. They did go through a lot of trauma. And as much as many find comfort and become empowered, we all know social media has its pitfalls. There can be a trial by media, meaning it can become a platform of being the judge and the jury. And we must be careful about that. Let's not kid ourselves about the impact on the survivors. I mean, there's a personal cost element, I think, as many run the risk of their lives being turned upside down, people talking about them, examining every move they make, and even those who do not know them talking about it, or do not know anything about the incident, they talk about it. And you may get negative comments, you may get humiliated online, threatened, verbally or abused online, or even, why did you do that? Why did you dress that? Or what did you say? He's a partner. He couldn't have said that. He's a leading first, a member of the bar. How could you have said that? Or he's somebody. Well, then that, of course, the victim blaming comes in. And mind you, whatever you post, screenshots can be taken. Screenshots posted in varied platforms, and you have no control over it. And that is scary when you have no control over it. Or sometimes people just screenshot bits and pieces without any connection. And this is the part that some people say, oh, should you mention it? I said, yes. What if you don't tell your close friends that you're going online and you get bombarded? You don't tell your family. I got several survivors who've told me, I never mentioned to my parents and they heard about it. That's another trauma that you go through, another challenge that you go through if you don't tell people close to you. I know it's your right, but when family members hear about it through other channels, you must be prepared to respond to them. And being a parent myself, I'm obsessed with that. Yeah, and so you have, what you call another trauma to deal with, and that apart from the incident itself. So that's basically what I just wanted to say, that, the negative impact and the positive impact social media can have, you must be careful before you go on media, social media. Perhaps most importantly, best not to name the person, talk about the incident, and what can we do to improve it if you want to go on social media. These are the pitfalls you need to be aware of.
Thank you, Mira. So, listening to you, Mira, it seems that on the one hand, people will go to social media, some of them, and at the same time, when they go to social media, they may not understand all the difficulties that lie ahead. Because at the end of the day, there is an element of losing control, because when you put something on social media, you actually lose control of it, right? Not detracting from the empowering things that you say, I'd like to turn to Sinu at this moment and ask you, Sinu. So 46% of the audience say that it is acceptable for the audience to discuss what they have gone through on social media. What I'd like to ask you to do is to talk about the legal risks, specifically defamation, liability to the MCMC, even cyberbullying. So not to frighten people off from talking about things like this on social media, but we think having the right knowledge and information may actually empower you to handle this the right way. Sinu, would you please talk about these things?
Yeah, thanks, Santi, and thanks, Mira, for that very thorough explanation. Just picking up from what Mira had said, once you post something online, there is a risk of losing control. And apart from, opening up yourself to legal liabilities, you're also opening yourself to online attacks. And that is something that the law, I feel, is simply inadequate to deal with, because online attacks, they can just happen in the matter of hours. And by the time you lodge a complaint against the perpetrators to the authorities, that post of yours or those attacks could have already gone viral, which would open yourself up to more attacks. I'm not sure. Well, I'm not gonna cite an example based on the sexual harassment case, but I'm sure that there are similar cases like this. But one very good example was a few years back. This case, there was this BFM presenter. I can't remember her name now, but she posted a video on nasi lemak and hudud and the Kelantan flirts and all. And what happened was she started receiving attacks, and BFM started receiving attacks on their page, and Malay Mail picked up on it. So Malay Mail reported on the attacks, which resulted in more attention to that particular post, and more people started attacking it. And it didn't stop there. BBC came in, BBC picked up on that post, and suddenly it went worldwide. And by then the original post had been deleted, but there were attacks sprouting everywhere. So that's just one example of how social media can't be controlled, and there is a risk of that happening. So that's something that you need to bear in mind. Now let me talk about defamation. When you decide to go online, let's not pretend that defamation is something that is far-fetched. It's not. That would be something that would be at the forefront of the person that you have accused or named, his or her mind. So the problem, and I suppose this is something that defamation law needs to, perhaps we need a rethink on defamation laws, perhaps something closer to what the American model is. But in our system, where we follow the British model, if the words or the publication that you have made is capable of being construed as being defamatory, that's being injurious to that person's reputation, that would be prima facie defamatory of that person. And you would then have the burden of proving that that post or that publication of yours, it's either, well, number one, if it's true, then it's fine. So you have to justify it, and there will be no defamation. You have to either prove that it's true, or you have to say that it's a fair comment, or you have to say that it's made under a situation of qualified privilege. So usually under the third example that I've cited, qualified privilege, is something that is normally not available to the victims. Qualified privilege simply means that you making that post in your particular capacity, and by virtue of your capacity, normally it's a reporter or a journalist, you are given certain privileges where things that you said would not otherwise, which would be defamatory if someone else said it, but because of your particular status or your capacity of making that statement, it would not be defamatory because you have said it. So that's qualified privilege, usually not available to the victims. Then you are left with justification. So justification requires you to prove that whatever that you had accused that person of doing is true, and you need evidence to back it up. So the onus is on you to prove that what you say is true, instead of on the accused proving that it is false. So that's very important, because it is not easy to prove that it is true in cases like this, because of the private nature of the offense. What about fair comment? Well, fair comment, sometimes, and this is where, before you decide to go public or post something on social media, you probably have to construct your post carefully. And if you are blatant about it, you may not be able to say that this is fair comment. It's very hard to explain fair comment in the abstract. But what I would suggest is that if you are going to go public, just be careful with your words. Innuendo, would be helpful, or what else? Mira, perhaps you could help here.
The person.
Huh? Maybe be subtle about it.
Yeah.
Be subtle about it, you know. And
So can I just you? So subtlety means what? Excluding all the details about the perpetrator. How subtle is subtle that you can get away with it?
how subtle is subtle? Well, I would say that if you are going to say that, for example, this person touched you, or this person had harassed you over a period of time, you could construct it in a manner where you left your job. If you had left your job, and you you left your job because of the environment that you were in, and that environment made you feel that you were no longer comfortable working there because of certain actions that had been taken by certain parties that made you feel that you have been you felt harassed.
I think you speak about your emotions, the
Yeah,
act on you.
You were very troubled. You could even say that you were traumatized, and that because of the power imbalance that exists in that particular organization that you're in, you were not able to receive a meaningful resolution. So something along those lines. You see, I'm saying a lot, but not saying anything at all at the same time.
So let me ask you a further question, Sinu. So if everybody knows where I work, and I say I've resigned, I'm traumatized, there is a power imbalance, there are people in the organization I don't trust. Everybody knows where I work. Next thing I know, the employer is going to come and sue me. So how subtle is subtle? So what do people need to think about?
Correct. But if you were to take that example of a publication compared to one where, oh, this guy, he's my employer, he touched me, I lodged a complaint, the firm didn't do anything at all. You see, those are very explicit accusations and quite clearly defamatory. Okay? So you have to justify it. And you, as a victim, you're going to have a problem there. Because you actually have to prove that the person touched you, you lodged a complaint, they didn't do anything, and then you're left as a result. Compared to the earlier suggestion that I've made, you're talking about your emotions.
Yeah.
It's more subjective. It's open for interpretation. And you could say that that's a fair comment. That's something that it's fair for me to say because I felt it. I'm not saying that, that's something that had happened as a matter of fact. So it's more defensible from a legal point of view. And I think we are speaking amongst lawyers here. You would know which case you would prefer to defend and which case is the easier case to defend. And then, that you could build on that. But of course, if you have clear-cut evidence, you have irrefutable evidence, by all means, name and shame. But if you don't, then be careful about it.
Thank you, Sinu. Mira, there's actually a question from the audience. I just want you to deal with this very quickly. The question is, can sexual harassment happen in the same gender?
Of course.
A simple answer to that?
Yes, definitely, it can. But we're talking right now, as it is, we're talking about sexual harassment within the Employment Act, civil law, criminal law. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next slide. And as I do that, I'd like to invite the audience, if you have questions, to please actually raise those questions with us in the chat, and those questions will be transmitted to us. So then we will take time to answer those questions as we go along. The next slide is about whether someone who knows about the incident but was not the victim is entitled to raise a specific issue of sexual harassment on their own social media account. The resounding 65% of the people who responded said no. And of course, that factors that were to be considered included the following. So I've taken based on the majority of responses or rationale as to why third parties shouldn't post about other people's sexual harassment incidents. The first and key one, 30.5% of the respondents took the view that it is not your story to tell. Second, they said, think about the victim. The victim may not be ready to talk about this incident, and you have to consider what if it causes negative impact to the victim. Third, and this is an interesting perspective, if indeed you feel compelled to post something like this about someone you know, ideally you should check with the victim before making such a post. And the big question was, how much of the details would you actually post if you are not the victim? And the last one was the issue of depth of knowledge. And of course, being lawyers, a lot of people said hearsay. Okay. So what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to ask Danny a question, if I may. Danny, I know personally that over the years, you've been a tremendous support to a lot of people who have dealt with sexual harassment, and that you have provided a listening ear, a helping hand, a shoulder to cry on. And first question to you, would you post about a third party sexual harassment on social media, on your social media? Would you?
Yeah, well, it depends. So first of all, I would actually consider the purpose of posting the story. You know, there's strength in knowing that you are not the only person who is experiencing it or has experienced sexual harassment. And you know, that is why the Me Too movement was, you know, was so popular, that got so much attention, and it spread all over, you know, including Malaysia, because it's such a common issue that affects so many people around the world. So, you know, when someone tells you that they have been touched, or they have been kissed, they have been, you know, harassed, you know, or that someone made a sexual joke that made them uncomfortable, and another person says, oh, you know what, I've actually experienced that too, you realize that you're actually not alone. And it's even more empowering when you find a connection between your story and another person's story, and how you feel and how you wish no one else would have to go through the same thing.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah. So on your social media, so you hear all these stories, what are the considerations that you take into account when you contemplate whether to post or not?
First of all, I think the survey, you know, a lot of the responses are actually, you know, the actual considerations that I would take. So first, yes, you need to get the survivor's consent. Why? Because it's their experience, right? And you know, if you are giving out information that may identify them, or even the alleged perpetrator or any related party or organization, you need to be careful with that, like what Xin Yu said. And if the survivor is not ready to deal with it and you can't either, then don't. You know, it's a story that is personal to the survivor. Secondly, you know, adding on to what Xin Yu said about subtlety, you have to consider how much detail you want to provide, right? You don't want to reveal too much information. And you know, the moment that you do that, then you know, there's always, like, you know, people are going to find out, okay, where did this happen, how, who did it, and that will actually, you know, could get you into trouble. And you need to be prepared for backlash, not just against you but also the survivor. So I would suggest limiting the information, and taking out details, unless you are actually doing it as part of a, like, intentionally as part of a strategy. And sometimes we do this actually in order to, like, gain attention, or to create awareness on an issue. Before doing this, I would actually suggest that you obtain some legal advice on you know, I think one of the responses is that they say that it's not their story. That's true to a certain extent, but you know, sometimes, I just want to add, sometimes it's actually everyone's story. And you will be surprised by how many people who have seen or experienced similar incidents once you speak up. Just to share a personal experience, many years ago, I was, sexually harassed by a driving instructor when I was about 17, 18 years old. And what he did was that he actually rubbed his hand on my thigh. So like you're sitting in the driver's seat and the instructor is sitting in the passenger seat, right? So he actually grazed, his hand on my thigh, and he said, "Oh, I'm just teaching you how gears are supposed to work. It's supposed to be smooth." At the time, I think I just didn't.
Realize.
It just didn't. I felt that it was not right, but I was also a bit scared because I was very young and I wasn't used to that kind of um, act. But I never told anyone, and I never shared the story, and I tried to bury it deep in my memory vault. But recently, when I was talking to a friend, and she just happened to tell me that, oh, when she was doing her driving lessons, again, like 20 years ago or so, she said that she had her driving instructor harass her and did the exact same thing. So that was when I realized, my goodness, like, how many people have actually experienced this, and could it be the same person? And there's that connection that you feel, and you feel like, oh, okay, so it wasn't just me, I wasn't just overreacting, I wasn't overthinking it, it was a real thing, and it was wrong, right? And I wish and I hope that nobody else faces that same problem.
Thank you, Danny. Sin, you just going back to your earlier discussions about the legal standpoint. So if it is not the victim who posts, but it is their friend or relative or someone who cares about them, and they do this because they want to share what has happened, from a legal standpoint, are they at greater risk than if the victim themselves posted it, or are we in the same boat?
No, not exactly. How I would do it is, if I were to share a story, I would share it as a comment. That's the safest way of doing it. And this is something I think I omitted to mention earlier. When you're talking about fair comment, it needs to be a comment. It shouldn't be presented as a matter of fact. So if you present it as a comment, and that comment speaks about, for example, what the victim had felt, what the victim had gone through, and what do you feel about it, and what do you feel of the process that underlies everything, I think it's very hard for anyone to make out a case that you have defamed whoever that could have been implicated by what the victim had published. So perhaps there is this fear that when you're talking about third-party social media postings, you are talking about someone else's experience, and there's this. I think in a way it's a Malaysian. Perhaps it's not a Malaysian thing, but I just feel that it's more apparent here in Malaysia that itu hal dia, jangan campur tangan, shouldn't get involved. You shouldn't comment on it because it's such a taboo subject, which I find it quite puzzling, because when it comes to other types of crime, murder, criminal breach of trust, money laundering, we are also readily to comment, and you would see social media being rife with such comments. But when it comes to sexual harassment, unless it's like those tabloid like Cosmos and all, you would see that people are generally more guarded. Okay, let's not comment here. It's I think it's still seen as a subject that is taboo, and I think that is something that we as a society need to perhaps mature and change this mindset of ours, that it is okay to talk about sexual harassment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think at the end of the day, every person in the audience or people who are watching this later on have to remember that it's a decision you make. And I think Danny's advice on this is easily the best. Consult a lawyer. Whether you are the victim or survivor, or whether you are someone who cares, who wants to publicize that this has happened, please consult a lawyer. Moving onward, I'd like to pause for a minute and direct a question from the audience to Danny and Mira, perhaps one of you. Is there equal protection for victims of different genders? Does the law equally protect victims of different genders? Mira, you want to answer that?
Yeah, it's the same protection for everyone. It shouldn't differ. I'm interested to know why the participant posted that unless they have encountered different protection, uh, there's definitely equal protection for everyone.
Is that true in real life, or is that only the theory?
I think the male survivors who have spoken to me, their impact is very similar, and they have filed police report, uh, waiting for their case to be heard. Uh, I guess as we know, the Bar Council, we've had few cases, so I don't know from the Bar Council what has transpired. Yeah, so I believe it should be the same, and the redress mechanism should be the same. It shouldn't. But I'm curious to know why that question was posed.
Okay, so the person who posted that question, if you would like to further comment, please do so in the chat. I'm just going to move on to the things that you wanted us to talk about. So again, we had a whole host of things that everybody wanted us to talk about. So what we did was we picked the four main ones. The first one is about the first one is about what is the legal route, and we'll talk about that a little later. Second, handling sexual harassment against a superior, if you are a new staff or it's a new staff, and what are the consequences of complaining. Third, what is sexual harassment? And a very specific question, are sexist jokes sexual harassment? And fourth, what to do when nothing happens after you complain at work, whether the employee can sue the employer for damages. Because we're talking about the Johor Bar, specific question was, how is the Johor Bar going to help the victim? Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with some baseline stuff and deal with what is sexual harassment. And I'd like to ask Mira, would you care to explain sexual harassment, please?
Yeah. Sexual harassment is an unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature that has the purpose or effect of violating a person's dignity, the person who has been harassed, or creating an intimidating, hostile, or an offensive environment. So basically, there are three elements involved. It's sexual in nature, it's unwanted, and we look at the impact on the recipient. The impact could be it causes negative impact personally, and or can cause negative impact on her work schedule or working conditions, or if you're a student, your studies. So it's very subjective. And the impact is real to some. And for example, you were talking about sexual jokes.
Yeah.
Some of us might say, there he goes again, or there she goes again, talking about sexual jokes. And some of us don't take to it and think it's really inappropriate and it's wrong. Whether we can take it or not, it is wrong. We all know it's wrong. So why do it? I mean, for example, I know many would say, hey, it's my right. I have the freedom to express what I feel like it. But I also have the freedom to not be violated. These two freedoms, they are on the same par. One is not higher than the other. So I have a right to live a life free of dignity, free of violence. So why make these sexist jokes? You know, if it was a racial comment, as I think, was it Sinyu was mentioning, if it was a racist joke, we all would be up in arms. If it was something to do with a religious joke or cultural joke, we'll be up in arms. But when it comes to sexist jokes, are we up in arms? Are we standing up? No, we have to. We cannot tolerate. I mean, even with racist jokes, many, many years ago, some people just kept quiet. But the movement started and we said, no, we cannot do this. Similarly, we are saying, no, we have to stand up. That was sexist remarks. No, so then the types of sexual harassment I also want to talk about. Of course, we have the physical, which is like touching inappropriately, kissing and patting. Then we have the verbal, uh, the sexual jokes, the innuendos, the visual, showing pornographic material, psychological, which is unwanted social invitations. So these are the different forms of different types of sexual harassment. So in a nutshell, yeah, stop it.
So I'm going to ask a question, and this is from the audience.
Mm.
So this is a statement. I was sent an improper video by someone I know whom I have a working relationship with. Is that considered to be sexual harassment?
Yeah. If if I find it inappropriate, please go and tell that person who sent it to you, can you please stop sending me this? Don't be a bystander. Don't be a victim. Don't, if you feel it's inappropriate, for the fact that you've already said it was an improper video, it's wrong already. So tell the person, stop it. If you don't, I will have to take it up.
Thank you, Mira. At this point, folks, we actually invited someone who has been sexually harassed to come and share her story with you. For a variety of reasons, she has chosen to keep her identity private. And for the purposes of this event, we will call her Survivor A. So I would like to emphasize that this is a very, very personal story, and to understand that Survivor A is only sharing as much as she is able to. Survivor A, may I ask you to share your story, please?
Thank you. Good evening. I filed a case against.
Survivor A, you need to speak a little bit louder, please.
I filed a case against the perpetrator, my immediate supervisor, and he was the leader in an organization. At that time, I was a senior member in the organization, and I report directly to him. The HR process didn't envision a case where the perpetrator could be the boss, the number one guy. So I had to fight for a fair process because everyone involved in the HR process reports to him. So I had to fight for an independent process. And this process and the whole investigation took a very, very long time, almost a year from my filing to the final outcome. And during this time, I continued to work in the organization. I went through both the internal investigation and the domestic inquiry processes. And during this time, I had to face so many challenges. It begins with me when I filed my complaint. It was only acknowledged 1 month after I sent to the chairperson. According to the HR process, they must acknowledge it within 3 working days. Then the organization tried to put in an investigator who is known to the perpetrator to investigate my case. And there were also many continuous attempts by the HR who reports to him directly to control the process. I was also told to transfer out of my usual workplace and attend meetings overseas where he will be there and he will lead the meeting. I was put under performance evaluation by my temporary supervisor, who also reports to him. Colleagues who had confided turned against me, and one actually called me a liar to my face, and continuous delays after delays. They attempted to make me give up the case. All I did during that 1 year was just to fight. I was thoroughly exhausted. I was very angry. It was hurtful. It was awful the way that the organization tried to protect itself and not protect me at all. And they failed to give me a safe working environment, especially after I filed. After an investigation by a senior external person who are experienced in sexual harassment in the workplace, a QC actually, and she was only recruited because I insisted on an external person. 3-member panel of the domestic inquiry agreed with the findings of the investigator and that I was telling the truth, and I was relieved and that they believed me. However, because of the delays in the process, remember it took more than a year, nearly a year, the perpetrator was allowed to retire early before the findings were made known, and he escaped any liability. I then filed a complaint against the chairperson of the board for mishandling the process of my complaint, including excessive delays and for allowing the perpetrator to escape liability. Again, I won, but since the chairman is not an employee, so she escaped any liability. I have since resigned from the organization. I no longer wanted to have anything to do with them. They failed to protect me. But I really have to tell you that even when I won, even when it was worth it, at the end of it, it really actually didn't feel like winning because the whole process was so dehumanizing. Thanks, Shanti.
Thank you, Survivor A. Survivor A, I'd like to refer to a comment in the chat, and I'd like to ask whether you have any input. This comment says, most of the victims are afraid to open up or report due to the consequences that may arise afterwards. For example, being given less work, etc., or being at risk of being treated unprofessionally. What are the options for one of the victims who is also considering the difficulty to prove sexual harassment in the first place, and due to a lack of legislation? So with specific reference to this comment, I'd like to ask you, Survivor A, first, how difficult was it for you to prove sexual harassment? And second, how did you cope with, being attacked by the people you trusted in your office, having to deal with your allegations being rejected over and over again? Can you talk about that with us, please?
How did I cope? I breathe. Every day I wake up and I make sure that I get up and breathe and go through hell again every day. And I just had to do it because the perpetrator was very smart. All the harassment was done in private, like the lawyer was saying just now. Everything was done in private. I only went out when I had enough circumstantial evidence, and that was the only reason why I stayed in the organization. I didn't leave. I stayed. I also enjoyed my job, and because we were away, we were not in the same office, but we were in contact often enough. So every time when I had a meeting overseas, every time he would find opportunities, but somehow sooner or later, I managed to gather enough evidence. And another way that I coped was afterwards, I found a therapist to assist me with my mental health, because I only did this after I filed, because I found out that that's something that I really needed. And that was also because of suggestion by somebody else, because I didn't realize that I was going through this. So I had help, therapist help, who really actively worked with me throughout the investigation process. I wouldn't have survived without my therapist, honestly. Thanks, Tandy.
Thank you, Survivor A. And I think that Survivor A has shared a really important message, and this resonates with everything that you're hearing today. First, that you are not alone. And second, that you don't have to deal with this alone, therefore. And, this mental health issue, everybody is very, very cautious. If you're tiptoeing around sexual harassment, I guarantee folks that we're tiptoeing around mental health. When you need help, you need help. There is nothing to be afraid of. If you're physically ill, you go to a doctor. If you need support, go to a mental health professional, please. Okay, wow. So having heard from Survivor A, and thank you so much for sharing what I know is a very, very difficult story for you. I'd like to move on to talk about what was the second most popular question. So the second most popular question was about how to handle sexual harassment. And I'd like to ask Danny, if you would, to share your views specifically on handling sexual harassment. So Danny has prepared a slide for us, which I'm putting on screen right now. And by the way, folks, you don't have to take screenshots. At the end of this event, we will send a copy of these presentation materials to you for your reference. Danny?
Great. Thank you, Santi. And thank you, Survivor A, for sharing your story. Okay, so what do I do and where do I go? There are actually different avenues that you can go through. Sometimes, in mild cases and where it is practical, you can ask the perpetrator to stop. So, for example, if it's someone that you work with, you're on the same level, for example, then you can actually, tell the person that, look, this is really inappropriate, and you're making me uncomfortable. This is harassment. This is actually very common, and especially in the context of, like, you're hanging out with people that you see every day, and they make sexual jokes, or inappropriate jokes, and a lot of people, when they do that, they say, oh, it's just harmless banter and all that, but it's not. And sometimes in that sort of context, you can actually say, you know what, stop it. But where it's not practical, and in many cases, this is where, like, let's say, the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator is a person of authority, or someone with like a certain level of seniority, who's above you, right? Then there are a few options that you can go with. And this list is not exhaustive, obviously. So one is within the organization. So if it happens in the context of employment, then you can reach out to either HR or a trusted person, preferably someone in management or someone who has authority, and lodge a complaint. And under the Employment Act, the organization is obliged to investigate into the matter. This includes universities and colleges as well. And I think currently there's an ongoing draft where we actually want to amend the Employment Act to provide even better protection. Secondly, it will be helpful if your organization itself has a policy and mechanism in place. If there's actually a code on prevention and eradication of sexual harassment in the workplace that the organization can adopt. Unfortunately, it's not binding. It's something that is that can be voluntarily adopted. So that's where it's a bit difficult. For those in the public service, there's actually a circular that was issued in 2018. And even that one actually says that sexual harassment can happen between different genders. Third, even if you're not an employee, you may still be able to lodge a complaint against the organization related to the perpetrator. For example, if, like, let's say the incident occurred in a hotel or a gym and you were a guest, some of these organizations or bodies may have policies and mechanisms to deal with sexual harassment. Some of them may not, but I've seen cases where certain organizations, I'm not going to say all of it, but certain organizations do take it seriously, and the outcome of that will depend, right? Whether or not how the organization deals with it can vary from one place to another. The other option that I'm sure most of you are aware of is the criminal litigation, or, like, you need to lodge a report to the authorities, and this could be either the police or the MCMC if the incident occurred online. And if the authorities decide to pursue the action, this it will be prosecuted by the state, and you will become the main witness. And the outcome of that could be either imprisonment or fine to the perpetrator. But that is that would work if it actually goes if the investigation actually proceeds and there is eventually a prosecution. The other option that I think even earlier the Bar Council President actually mentioned is through civil litigation, and you can appoint a lawyer to act on your behalf. And the outcome depends on what you want, right? Your lawyer will be able to advise you on possible remedies or compensation or damages. And I think most of you would know this because I think most of you are lawyers yourselves. There are other options as well, like the Labour Office, or if incident occurred online, you can actually report to the website or the site where the incident happened. In considering these options though, there are a few things that needs to be considered. One is you need to be prepared to undergo an investigation or undergo interviews about the incident. And this is where you need to be as detailed as possible in order to pursue and defend your claim. And I think even Survivor A has mentioned this, you will be asked the same question over and over and over and over again, and you have to explain it again and again with the same detail, because every time you say something that is not the same as what you said earlier, then that's where the other side can poke holes. So it's good to to keep records of incidents, the date, the time, the location, what happened, who was involved, and who was around. Were there any witnesses? Were there people around you? Or if not, were there any screenshots if it's something that you can actually see? Or were there emails or pictures? Did you speak to anyone immediately after the incident? Because sometimes the people that you speak to can also help in sort of strengthen your case, and you can call this person as like one of your witnesses. And sometimes in an inquiry, we've seen like the person that you spoke to could actually corroborate or support your evidence about how you reacted and your behavior after the incident. Sometimes I find it, it is also helpful to write about it in a journal, and especially while the details are still fresh in your mind. Having said all these, as you can see, firstly, some of these options require a certain criteria that you need to meet. So for example, if it's an employment context, then you need to have that sort of relationship between employer and employee. Secondly, if you're planning on civil litigation, for example, you need to spend money and you spend time on litigation, and that can be quite a lengthy process. And this happens in every single case that I've seen. The process can be very traumatizing. Even when you have an existing mechanism in place, it doesn't necessarily work. And this is why we at AWL, Association of Women Lawyers, and also part of JAG, we are asking the government for a standalone sexual harassment act. And we've been involved in the special project team with the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development to develop a bill. So one of our asks is to improve the definition of sexual harassment. So like what Mira said earlier, it should be any unwanted conduct that is sexual in nature in any form, whether it's gestural or verbal, whether it's online or offline, and to widen coverage so that more people are protected from sexual harassment, for example, like public places. The second ask that we want is to require public and private actors to take proactive measures to combat sexual harassment, and that this is something that is quite special in that sense, because we are asking for accountability, and we want a positive duty to maintain and ensure a safe environment in any space. Thirdly, we want to enhance protection and access to justice. What we're proposing is actually a tribunal for complaints to be dealt with expediently and within defined timelines, that cases are heard in private and that they are heard by a tribunal consisting of people who have experience in sexual harassment issues, among others. And the other one, or the fourth one, amongst other things, is to allow complainants to seek remedies such as compensation or to obtain a restraining order, from the perpetrator repeating the act or acts. And it would also, one of the things that we suggested is also counseling. So these are some of the key asks that we wanted the government to include in the Sexual Harassment Act, and we hope that this will actually be passed sometime end of this year or hopefully early next year. But that's as far as the law is concerned, right? I think equally important, or or even probably more
Mm.
important actually, is that we need to continue talking about it, like how we're doing now, and talking to people who have experienced it, and continue to raise awareness, because the system can only do so much. The more the more that people talk about it, the more that you understand. Okay, I need to be careful about what I'm saying. I need to be careful about how I act. Um, and that we can work with each other and help each other. If you hear someone saying something to another person, you can actually help and say, oh, you know what, that's not appropriate. um I don't think you should be making that joke, or I don't think you should be saying that. So that's also just as important as trying to get the legal redress or legal remedy sorted.
Well, thank you, Danny. I think there are lots of very powerful thoughts and ideas behind everything that you said. I'm going to give you a breather for a minute, although I'll come back to you. Mira, let's say someone lodges a complaint with the relevant authorities, nothing happens, or they get brushed off. What would you advise them to do?
I believe when you mean nothing happens, it's
Yeah.
maybe they're slow, or
They're slow, or they've said no, you can't prove it, get out the door, I'm too busy, whatever. What would you do?
you
What
can be
is your advice?
strategic about your plan of action. If you're a university student, I would say seek support from your student union or your group, and together decide what course of action, because it's better in numbers than to be alone.
Yeah.
Perhaps see the dean with or have an online campaign going on. Uh, because at the end of the day, I'm talking about university, uh, you want a policy in place and that they take it seriously, a zero tolerance policy. With that, then you can start pushing your own agenda um, with a team, I think. Uh, Law firms, of course, if you lodge a complaint to the bar council, nothing happens, then I guess seek the assistance from AWL. Perhaps that would be because we will be seen as an NGO, and helping you with issuing, speaking to the president probably, or speaking to your relevant council. Depends which state you are from, your bar chair, issuing a press statement with NGOs, because your bar chair can't issue a statement. I think it's very important also to reach out to NGOs that can provide you the emotional support, the psychological support. Apart from professionals like mental health, the, the counselors there too can help, in the professionals, can help you uh, basically lay out the options for you, go through with you. Okay, option A, this is what may happen. Option B, this is what may happen. Option C, and then you decide what is the best option for you, you know the consequences of it. I think that's important. uh, of course, you have the social media, who, which can change the narrative, but as we have gone through all the pitfalls and the positives, you got to be aware. And the best advice is seek legal advice. Seek legal advice from your other law friends, lawyers, or senior law members, senior lawyers, who would be able to steer you, help you through it, and keep knocking on the doors of whoever has failed you. Keep knocking until the door opens. Don't give up. As Survivor A has done, she never gave up. She gathered the evidence. She made sure she had the evidence. So if you read, I mean, you must have that strength, emotional support to pull you through. You must have that and find that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mira. I actually have a question for Survivor A from the audience. And the statement is, from your experience, what is the most helpful way to react to someone who is telling you about sexual harassment they have suffered? So what was it, I think, that you found the greatest solace in when you confided in people, how their responses to you? What was the most empowering or the most useful or the least damaging, Survivor A?
I think that they believe me. I think that's more crucial. And yeah, that's it.
So what do you expect from someone listening to you? So at the time this happened, and you confided in someone, one, you wanted them to believe you, but what did you want them to do for you? Was there anything specific that you wanted them to do for you, to help you, to support you? Survivor A?
Well, technically, when you're going through it, there's nothing anyone else can do, because you had to go through it alone, because it's you against the organization or you against the boss. Apart from believing me, I think to be there, I guess, to be there, believe me, and because at the time when I was going through, sometimes all I wanted to do was talk about it, and I talk about it over and over again, because maybe it's like trying to convince myself that it actually happens and that I'm not going nuts and I'm not making these things up, because there are others who said, no, it was you, it was the way you behave with him, it was the way you allow it to happen. So the fact that when I say something and somebody believe me, and to be there and to listen, I think that really, 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 really is really helpful.
Thank you very much, Survivor A. I'd also like to direct a couple of questions to Sinu. The first one is, if a person was to post about the survivor story, but started off with, I was told that XYZ harassed her, but I am not sure if it's true. I just want to create awareness. Does that amount to fair comment?
No, because you have to see where is the comment in that statement. Fair comment needs to be a comment. So what that statement amounts to, it's basically hearsay, and if the cues could be identified, then you might have a problem there. Yeah, so it wouldn't be fair comment. Perhaps you could frame it better. You could frame it by saying that this has happened. Another incident has happened in the industry. Again, this story is very similar to many others out there, and I think more awareness should be raised, given that stories like this keep surfacing and it's all too similar. Something along those lines.
Thank you. And at this point,
writer in you.
At this point, I'd like to say that nothing stated in this event shall amount to legal advice to anyone. Yes. A second point for you, Sinu. Would the victim or a third party who uses social media, one, to effectively find out what they can do about harassment that's happening to them, two, where they can seek help, and three, how to make a police report, be equally liable in defamation? So I'm the survivor. I want to fight this. I go on social media and I say, can someone tell me what a person should do, asking for a friend, what a person should do if they're sexually harassed, how do they get help, who do they get help from, how do they make a police report? So if I post that on my social media and I'm not accusing anyone, I'm asking for a friend, so to speak, does that amount to defamation?
No, I think the person asking that question, I suspect, would probably know the answer. It wouldn't be, it's only defamation if you would be able to identify the accused from the statement that you have made. But if it's just questions and no one can be identified from those questions, it definitely wouldn't be defamation.
Thank you. Danny, now that I've given you a little break, I have a question for you from the audience. What kind of support, and I'm asking you this because I know this is something that you do and care about deeply, what kind of support can be provided to victims from the time such an allegation is made to the time of lodging a police report, all the way to the time when the case is actually brought to court? So I'm not asking survivor A, I'd like a different perspective. So what kind of support from the beginning of this journey, allegation all the way to the courts? What would you advise someone?
Okay, so from experience, usually the first thing that comes to mind is actually that you want to act fast. Um, I mean, and this is actually very difficult to say, because a lot of times you feel scared, and understandably so, because you feel like, or you worry about the consequences. On the other hand, usually I would ask the survivor, okay, so what do you want to do at this point? And how do you feel about it? So it's really up to the person to decide. But it is important to ask, like, what do you want to do, and what is the outcome that you want from this? Because, like, see, if you want to lodge a police report, or if you want to lodge a complaint, it's usually there's a, I don't want to say that it's better, but sometimes the perception is that it's better to do it as fast as you can, because the longer that you wait, the more then people will start asking you, why didn't you say this earlier? Why were you quiet, and all that? And I've seen this happen many times. At the same time, I think you need to also understand that sometimes the survivor is just not ready, right? And don't force the person, and you need to ask the person, okay, or you need to tell them, okay, so these are what could happen, right? Firstly, if you lodge a report now, then it's actually better, because the thing is, or the incident is still fresh in your mind, so it's something that you can easily explain. Secondly, that, okay, if you decide not to tell the story now, fine, why don't you detail out the incident? So in many of the cases where I speak to survivors, I ask them, can you tell me what happened, or like, can you provide a chronology? And some survivors are actually very, very good at that, and they know, okay, this day, what time, where so and so happened. And once you get that, then that will actually support you, and, like, who else did you speak to, and you can list out all these persons' names. Following that, then which option do you want to go through? So then it's important to, like, lay out the options. One is, okay, do you want to lodge a police report because so and so will happen? You will become a witness. You're not actually a party to the case. If it does come into prosecution, you're actually a witness, because it's actually between the prosecution and the state. If you want to take a civil litigation approach, then you need to be prepared to spend a certain amount of money. You need to speak to certain lawyers to gauge, how much it is that you're going to spend, and where can you go. Third, if you want to go through, like, let's say, through the organizations, or, like, let's say, an internal sexual harassment policy or mechanism, then so what are the possible consequences of that, or possible outcomes from that? And then once you list down all these possible options and possible outcomes, ask the person, how do you feel about this? And at all times, you need to ensure that, like, look, at the end of the day, it's your decision. I'm not going to ask you or force you to do anything, but this is up to you. And I'm going to be here every step of the way, and check on them every week. You ask them, how are you? And I think sometimes we don't do this enough. Like, we just say, okay, do this A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, but we never actually ask, how are you feeling? Right. So so those are some of the things that I would do.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. I think, Sinu, would you like to make any comments about available avenues?
Yeah, I think that is something that is quite something important that is absent from our discussion today. When we talk about available avenues, we tend to, how do I put this? We tend to generalize that these avenues are available to everyone, regardless of their gender. Yes, on paper, it is available to everybody, but certain communities, for example, those who, the LGBTIQ community, these avenues, like, for example, lodging a police report or even bringing a civil case against the perpetrator, that may not be a viable option for them, because when they do so, they risk inviting more attacks against them. So, assuming that you have a scenario where it is a male-on-male sexual harassment case, the victim, I would imagine, would be very reluctant to go to the police, because the police would say, oh, the police would instead question him on his sexuality or his gender, and then that could lead to more problems because of the laws that we have. So that avenue will not be available for him, and I think that would be the same for women on women, and it's the same for civil litigation as well, where you would have a case, and basically your entire sexual life is suddenly becoming the subject matter of a court case, and that's public document. So it's you can't treat everyone like to like, and I think that's a flaw in the system. I don't have a solution about it, but I thought that's something that I should raise. And yeah.
Can I comment on that, Sinu? I think you made a very interesting, very important point. Yes, perhaps not. But I think in circumstances like this, I think it's good to reach out to an NGO and to have that support, the support to push this forward. And I think that's what most of them have done. Whether it's a person with disability or trans person or a gay or lesbian, it is important to reach out to an organization for that support, and in fact take you through whether it's WAO or AWL or AWA. When you lodge the police report, there's some social worker, counselor there with you throughout the process. And when it comes to the court case, it's with you. Filing a report, yes, very important, especially if you're trans or gay, because with a social worker there, they know that you're being watched. And especially if you're in court or wherever it is, that you have a watch and brief lawyer, the organization that are backing you up. Those kind of support can be, I think will be very helpful, and the support there is important.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you.
I'd like to add to that, just a very brief one. I think, yes, well, what you said is true, and there's a very real risk that could happen, but so you need to balance, right? One, you don't want to scare the survivor so that they just keep quiet, because you say, okay, this is what's going to happen to you, your secret's going to come out and all that. At the same time, for me, at least, like, you want to be like an extra block of courage to the other person, and sort of like help them or strengthen them in that way, rather than just saying to someone, so these are the consequences, and I don't think it's a good idea to do this or that. And that's true. I mean, that's the truth, and unfortunately we have to deal with it. But at the same time, also, it's important to provide that support system, whether or not you're an NGO or whether you're a friend. Even, we need to strengthen each other to allow that person to have that courage to speak up, because it can happen to someone else as well.
Yeah, I was toying with this idea. We're talking about repercussions and blowbacks, right? I was toying with this idea. I'm not sure whether this is something that has been explored before. I'm not very experienced in this, but have we considered utilizing the Whistleblower Protection Act? Because when you talk about detrimental actions that one could face by lodging a complaint of sexual harassment against the perpetrator, there's a lot at stake here. And the Whistleblower Protection Act, it is not perfect, but it is some form of legal protection. I have my problems with the Whistleblower Protection Act when I tried utilizing it a number of years ago. But there has been some success, though not in the case of sexual harassment. That was it Bank Rakyat. Yeah, there was this Bank Rakyat case. Were you involved in that, Danny? I can't remember now.
Not Bank Rakyat. I think that was
Bank Rakyat. Yeah, but anyway, there was a CEO of a bank case, and he lodged a complaint and made some expose on some wrongdoings. So his contract was not renewed as a result, and he succeeded in using the Whistleblower Protection Act against the company. So that's something that perhaps victims can consider. Haven't tested it out yet. Glad to test it out one day.
Yeah, I mean, as far as sexual harassment is concerned, yes, you're right. I don't think that's been tested out, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, from that case, I think you're talking about that case from a few years ago. The person who complained about some inappropriate conduct or misappropriation by the organization or by the company actually was also subjected to a disciplinary inquiry as a result of lodging the report. So we were actually, we managed to successfully resist that.
Yeah, you could be a victim and a whistleblower at the same time.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a case where you saw something happen to another person and then you report.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. What I'd like to do now, as we're running short of time and not complaining at all, is I'd like to take us to the last bit of this journey with you this evening. And one of the questions that we asked in the survey was whether you think the Johor Bar should create a sexual harassment complaints mechanism or process that would allow victims or survivors to lodge complaints with the State Bar, with such complaints being dealt with confidentially and professionally. And a whopping 82.9% of you said yes. And here's the icing on the cake. Nobody actually said no. 17.1% said maybe. So when we look at the reasons, so we asked you, why would you say that? Those who said yes said, amongst other things, that it would be a leading example to other state bars to follow, that it would be an official avenue to help victims, that it would serve as an additional avenue for victims to resolve the matter when such unforeseen events occur, that it must be dealt with confidentially and professionally and should be handled by those equipped with knowledge of law and human rights, that the State Bar should be professional and superior and impartial when handling such matters, and that it's especially to help young lawyers who may be afraid to speak up. Now, for those who said maybe, the two reasons were, and the way this is asked is a question, so what exactly can the State Bar do? Would it report to the police? Where would they advise the victim to resign? They don't know the victim personally, so what happens? And the second comment was that it would create a platform for members to lodge a complaint with the State Bar instead of lodging a police report. So bearing in mind that this is a lead up to the Sexual Harassment Awareness Week in Johor, I'd actually like at this point to invite Shireen to share her views. First, congratulations on the 82%, although it's only 35 people, but hey. Let's talk about the steps your committee wants to take to make this mechanism and process happen for the lawyers and the legal community in Johor. Shireen?
Thank you very much, Santi. Okay, now before I actually go into explaining how the Johor Bar is, going to address this issue, I would actually very much like to thank the KL Bar for starting the ball rolling in terms of coming up with initiatives to address sexual harassment within the legal workplaces. I think it's remarkable that they did that. And what is even more remarkable is that they had actually shared that initiative with all the state bar chairs, and that is how I came to know about it. And, the moment I put it to my committee, without hesitation, we've taken it on board. And at this juncture, I would very much like to thank the Association of Women Lawyers for, coming on board, collaborating with the Johor Bar. Amira, thank you so much. She, all I did was to have a chat with her over lunch, and here we are, So thank you all very much. I thank all the panelists too. Now, going back to your question, yes. So what we have done, Santi, is essentially we have created a web page, right? So the web page is actnow.johorbar.org.my. And in that web page, we, of course, we have the menu. And if you navigate through the menu, you will come to sign the pledge. On the sign the pledge page, we have a pledge where legal firms would commit themselves to creating and establishing a safe working environment. And in addition to that pledge, at the bottom of that page, we have a workplace policy against sexual harassment. As of now, we have 9 who have signed the pledge, and this would be from the Johor Bar committee itself. Those of us who attended the meeting today have signed it immediately. And once we complete today, we will issue a circular, and then we will take on a more active dissemination and more active involvement of firms, even if it means having to call up the firms individually, we are prepared to do that. So now if I, go back, and so that is the pledge part of it. Next, we have a whole series of events to essentially create awareness, different aspects of this initiative that we've taken on. And of course, to kickstart our series of events is this wonderful webinar that we are all part of now. And Sati, initially, when we wanted to take on or have our own sexual harassment campaign, it was meant to have been a week of it. But what we've now decided to do is to keep it open and just keep on with the education and the awareness process, and having events as and when we come up with new issues and new topics to talk about. So following this event, we have another one coming up on the 27th of November. This would be, the topic of that event is dealing with the workplace harassment in law firms, and the speaker for that is Emilia Sharif. And the webinar will cover topics like understanding and identifying harassment, how you deal with it, and how you go from just a bystander to an upstander, someone who is more actively takes an active part, and certain expectations on senior lawyers and bosses. Then on the 29th of November, we have another forum, actually. This forum was actually meant to have been a hybrid in nature. It will continue to be hybrid in a sense that the speakers will be present at the Johor Bar Secretariat, but it would be televised, especially now in light of CMCO. We've had no choice but to change that accordingly. So for this webinar or forum, the proposed speakers are from the AG's chambers, We've got the IPK Johor, the ASB involved. And we've also got Puan Betty Yeo from the All Women's Action Society, and also a practitioner in criminal law. So by this webinar, we hope to get a better understanding of how the police deals with sexual harassment complaints, what is their first response mechanism, what is the advice, and also at the same time, the legal aspects of it, the legal avenues and the legal recourses available. What we are also working on now, but which we have not finalized, is we're working on engaging with a speaker to address mental health issues as a result of sexual harassment. That is crucial. That is crucial. So we're still working on the speaker. I believe that she has agreed to it, but we haven't finalized the date yet. But as I said earlier, as and when we come up with events, the events page will be updated. We also have a Get Help page, yeah. And in this Get Help page, we have sought to educate in a point form as to what amounts to sexual harassment, what the forms of sexual harassment, who can be a victim, who can be a predator, what you can do. And one of the things that we have also done is to provide a list of organizations that you can contact. And of course, those that we have named AWAM, WAO, WCC, Jewel, SAW, and SWWS. And in addition to that, the Johor Bar has also created a complaints form for members of the bar to lodge a complaint. And what Johor Bar will do is actually to receive those complaints. And from there, we would then evaluate the complaint and direct them or refer them to all the supporting organizations for help.
Thank you. So can I ask a couple of questions? First, so is lodging a complaint with your state bar an alternative to making a police report? What is your position on that specifically? Because that was a question that was asked.
No, it is not an alternative. You see, a lot of times people don't really know what to do. So, and I've listened to all the panelists here, and the recurring message is people need a direction. In addition to support, they need direction. So if they come to us, what we can do, we study the complaint, and then we then can advise them as to all the options which are available to them for support, for mental health, well-being, police reports, legal redress in terms of civil, civil actions, and then maybe be a support system for the victim.
Thank you. It applies to lawyers, it applies to pupils, it applies to employees within a law firm, it applies to interns. Who does it apply to? Who is the victim?
Anyone in a legal workplace, anyone, okay. Because it could actually be an employee who has actually suffered at the hands of a member of the profession, a legal practitioner. So I don't think we should actually shut them out.
Thank you. So this is a series of 4 questions, which I'm going to ask super fast, and I'm going to direct it to the people I think would be the best equipped to answer it. And let's try to do this very quickly because I'm very conscious of time and I'd like to do a wrap up. Mira, is uttering a vulgarity to a person of the opposite sex equal to sexual harassment? And should the victim first file a police report?
I think to anyone who utters to anyone a vulgarity is, of course, it makes you feel uncomfortable. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, yes, it is a harassment, a sexual harassment in nature. And the first thing I would do is before you file a police report or anything, tell the person off and say, stop
Yes.
it. You know,
Yes.
don't talk to me in this manner. If not, I will have to go to the authorities.
Thank you. The second question, and perhaps I direct this to Sinu, how are salaried partners protected under the Employment Act if they are not employees technically?
I'm not an employment lawyer.
I know,
Employment
but
lawyers here.
anyone? Shireen,
I
would you
think
know?
salaried partners
Yeah.
are employees, you know. So they would be...
Depends on the partnership agreement.
No, salaried partners would mean that you are not equity, right?
You're not equity, but you're salaried, but you come under the partnership when it comes, you know, the letterhead, you are seen as a partner. But there is an agreement between the partners, and it depends on the terms and conditions of the partnership agreement.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So the answer to that question is we don't know the answer. Could you please consult a lawyer?
Ask Mira after this.
I don't know.
Or Shaharin.
Salary partners, I said,
I have no idea.
Employment Act, then just go to your bar council and report. Go to Johor Bar and report.
That's right.
Which
you don't
It
need
brings us,
Yeah.
If you're
Sherry?
not sure, just come straight to the bar, the state bar, lodge your complaint, and we take it from there.
Absolutely. The third question, is the Bar Council able to take action against a lawyer or perpetrator today because the LPA does not expressly provide protection? I think the generic answer to that is one of the reasons we're doing all of these things and the state bars are proactively being involved in all of this is to make sure that there are avenues for victims/survivors to go and to have, you know, the relevant attention, respect, support, kindness, and everything that you need as you go through this, right? So I answered that. 4, is there a list of lawyers who are willing to take up sexual harassment cases, or should a victim approach an NGO for help?
We're not going to say the names of the lawyers.
No, we're not going to say the names of the lawyers. So our answer to you is please approach an NGO, or better yet, go directly to Johor Bar and deal with them there.
I just want to add to that. It's actually quite hard to find a volunteer lawyer, to be honest. And you know, you need to ask around, and sometimes yes, NGOs can help you, or like, you know, I also know a few people, but I mean, we can't recommend them publicly. That's not right. And it's not a lot lah. You know, in a lot of cases where you know, I speak to survivors, they're mostly looking for pro bono sort of help, and you know, that's quite challenging because, and especially during these COVID-19 times, right? It's very hard for someone to say, okay, I'll do it pro bono, but at the same time as well, not everyone can afford it. And that's one of the reasons why we are advocating for this new sexual harassment bill, so that you don't actually need a lawyer to help you. But that's the truth. I mean, unfortunately, in the current situation, it's quite hard to do.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask each of the panelists to wrap up. But for a while, the other panelists, I will not ask them specific questions. Actually, Survivor A, I have a specific question for you. What advice would you have for individuals who seek to support friends or family members who have had to deal with sexual harassment? Is there a right thing to say or do? And better yet, what are the absolutely wrong things to say or do?
Thank you, Santi. Absolutely wrong thing to say or do is to me like, why didn't you say no? Why didn't you walk away? Why didn't you report earlier? Things like that really it really kills me, because, you know, I did say no, I did try to walk, but I know as a lawyer, if I don't have enough evidence, this case wouldn't go anywhere. So I was collecting things. Please be there for the long run. You know this is going to take a long time, and please bear with the survivor. One thing we did, Dani just now did say that is really important. You need to tell the survivor to write every single thing down, especially in great details. But writing things down is not enough. You need to be there with her and rehearse. She needs to have the story in her head, and she needs to narrate it. She needs to tell it over and over and over and over again. So if you can, please rehearse with her. You need help to prepare, be the devil's advocate, because if she's not accurate, if she gets it wrong, the perpetrator would use it against her, and and sh- and sh- and she won't survive. But like I said earlier, also the mental health is really crucial. But because I'm speaking to you guys, I'm speaking to most of you who are members of the bar. I understand that you have to protect your client or the company that you're representing, but that does not mean that you need to make the process so dehumanizing or the survivor feeling so bad, or strip the survivor of the dignity when you're questioning her, when you're talking to the survivor, because that's what I went through. And after all, your first duty is to the court, to assist the court or the panel of inquiry to make the right decision. It's your common law duty. You know that your common law duty is not to your client. So please assist us. And I know right now it's very difficult to find a pro bono lawyer to assist, but at least one case a year, something, because it really helps. And it's really, you guys are expensive, yeah. Lawyers are expensive. So please help. It does. It makes a difference in a person's life. You can't imagine the difference that it makes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Survivor A. Last words, Sinu, one sentence. What would you give advice? What's the last thing you would say to the people here who are lawyers, who are law students, who may have gone through harassment themselves or know people who do? One sentence. What would you say?
I think collectively what we can do is we can work towards the stigmatizing sexual harassment, cases of sexual harassment. I think that it's still a topic that we are not talking about enough and not having a serious conversation about it. There are still many out there who still do not recognize that it exists. So that's something that I think we can change without having to change any legal framework or any laws. That is something we can do it within ourselves and to those within our circle of influence.
Thank you. Excellent, very long sentence. Danny, go for it. One sentence. What would you say to this audience to wrap up?
No, one sentence. Okay. Just because someone is a lawyer, don't assume that it's easier for that person to deal with sexual harassment. It's not.
Thank you.
It's not.
Mira.
I just want to touch on the topic of victim blaming, and it's quite often we are told, hey, he's a partner in a firm, she's a partner in a firm. She could not have said that. She's a person of standing. Victim blaming deflects from the actual incident itself. So I think it's important, first and foremost, constantly remind yourself it is not your fault.
Yeah.
You remind yourself that you are the victim, and now you can become a survivor.
Thank you. Shireen.
Speaking as a legal practitioner, we legal practitioners, we are defenders of human rights. We stand up against abuse, against discrimination. So we have to put our own house right. So for that, I would ask members of the bar, legal firms, pledge your allegiance to this cause, incorporate workplace policies, because once we work towards eradicating, we don't really have to then worry so much about having to deal with the consequences of sexual harassment.
Thank you. And a challenge to you, Shireen. KL Bar, the first week they launched this pledge. Within the first week, they had 200 law firms signed up.
I know, it's incredible. Congratulations
Yes.
to the KL Bar.
So you guys in Johor, you better go for it, man. I mean, we can make this into a nice, worthy competition. Okay, everyone, I think that brings us very, very nicely to the end of this event. And thank you so much for all the questions you've asked and your virtual participation in everything we've had to do with you this evening. We hope that you have found this session informative, empowering and useful, whether it is for yourself directly, for your practice, for people you know and love and care about. And our position is we need to continue these conversations. We need to have them as often as possible. We need to take away the taboo from the victims and survivors of sexual harassment. So we wish you a wonderful rest of the evening, and we look forward to you pledging with Jehovah. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, it's a wrap.
Yay! Well done, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dale. It went flawlessly. The questions
Hello.
came in beautifully. Thank you.